a missing mother, a murdered grandfather, and a small Kentucky town's darkest secrets. The Crystal Rogers case would prove that the deepest betrayals come from those closest to home. Crystal Rogers was a 35-year-old mother who had made a life for herself in the tight-knit town of Bardstown, Kentucky. Known for her unwavering love and commitment to her children, Crystal was the kind of person who could always be relied on: a daughter, a mother, a partner. She kept her family close and her responsibilities close to her heart, living each day with quiet strength. Her world was small but full of love, and for those who knew her, she was everything a mother and partner should be. But on July 4th, 2015, Crystal's life would change forever, as would the lives of everyone around her. That evening, she spent time with her boyfriend, Brooks Houck, at his home, enjoying a peaceful night. There was nothing unusual about the evening. It was just like any other. After some time together, Crystal was last seen playing games on her phone before bed. No one could have known that this would be the last time anyone would see her. The next morning, when Crystal didn't answer her phone, her mother, Sherry Ballard, immediately felt that something was wrong. Crystal had always been so dependable, always just a phone call away. Her sudden disappearance felt unreal. With every attempt to reach her failing, the family began to panic. By the afternoon, Crystal's sister, Brooke, joined the frantic search, but despite their efforts, they couldn't find her. By the evening of July 5th, Crystal Rogers was officially reported missing, and what began as a simple disappearance would unravel into a haunting mystery that gripped the entire community. The investigation that followed would reveal a web of shocking secrets, hidden truths, and complicated relationships, all leading to questions that no one was prepared to answer. As the days turned into weeks and then into years, Crystal's family held on to a fragile hope. Their lives had been torn apart, but they couldn't give up. Justice had to be served, and they would keep searching for answers, no matter the cost. The search for Crystal Rogers grew more desperate by the hour. Her family, hearts heavy with worry and fear, combed the streets of Bardstown, hoping for any sign of their loved one. But with each passing day, the anguish deepened. Then, just when they thought things couldn't get worse, a discovery would send a cold shiver down their spines: Crystal's vehicle. It was found along the Bluegrass Parkway, not far from Brooks Houck's home. The discovery was made by Casey, Crystal's brother, and Tommy Ballard, her father, who had been tirelessly searching for days. When they spotted the car, parked off to the side of the road, it struck them as eerie, quiet, still, as if it had been abandoned in haste. But the car's condition made it even more unsettling. Crystal's car had a flat tire, but that wasn't the most alarming detail. Inside, her personal belongings were scattered across the passenger seat. Her phone, purse, and keys were there, as though she had just stepped out for a moment. But the seat itself, moved much further back than Crystal's small frame would require, made no sense. It was as if someone else had been in the car before it was abandoned. But who? And where was Crystal? The eerie discovery left her family with more questions than answers. They already feared the worst, but now the mystery seemed deeper, darker. Had Crystal left the car in a hurry? Or had someone orchestrated her disappearance, making sure there would be no trace of where she had gone? And why was Brooks Houck, the man closest to her, not there to help with the search? His absence raised even more suspicion. Each twist in the investigation only heightened the confusion, leaving the family in a constant state of limbo. But even as the darkness of uncertainty thickened around them, they refused to give up. No matter how painful the truth might be, they were determined to find it. They would keep searching, hoping that somewhere, somehow, Crystal would be found. As the days dragged on without any sign of Crystal, the investigation took on a heavier, more urgent tone. The Nelson County Sheriff's Department acted quickly, conducting a thorough examination of Crystal's car. But despite their best efforts, no clear signs of foul play emerged from the vehicle. With so few clues to follow, the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. But that's when suspicion began to turn toward the people closest to Crystal, especially her boyfriend, Brooks Houck. Brooks was interviewed by law enforcement, and his story raised more questions than answers. He told investigators that he had been at his family farm on the morning of July 5th, 2015, and that he only realized Crystal was missing when he returned home. According to him, she had simply vanished overnight. But there were inconsistencies in his account. The timeline didn't add up, and his version of events seemed off. What raised even more suspicion was a strange 13-second phone call Brooks had made to a man named Steve Lawson, around the time Crystal was last seen. That brief, almost insignificant call became a red flag for investigators. But it wasn't just the phone call that troubled them. It was Brooks's lack of involvement in the search for Crystal. While her family and friends desperately combed the area, Brooks kept his distance. His behavior seemed to suggest that he knew more than he was letting on. But the mystery didn't stop there. Brooks's brother, Nick Houck, who had been a police officer in Bardstown, also came under scrutiny. Nick had been involved in the case from the very beginning, and his interference in the investigation quickly raised red flags. Despite his law enforcement background, his actions seemed to complicate matters rather than help solve them. He was eventually given a polygraph test, and he failed. His involvement in the case, combined with his connection to Brooks, made it impossible for investigators to ignore the possibility of a family conspiracy. As the investigation dragged on, it became clear that the Houck brothers' behavior was only making things harder for law enforcement. Every new revelation seemed to point back to them. Yet, despite mounting suspicion and a growing list of troubling actions, there was still no concrete evidence linking them directly to Crystal's disappearance. The case was still mired in mystery, and the search for answers continued. But something about the Houck family and their strange behavior suggested they might be hiding a much darker secret. As suspicions surrounding the Houck family deepened, the investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance reached a critical point. Law enforcement knew they needed to uncover something substantial, and in response to the mounting pressure, the FBI was brought in to help. The focus turned to the Houck family farm, a vast 240-acre property, and authorities obtained several search warrants to comb through the land, hoping to find any evidence that could connect Brooks or Nick Houck to Crystal's mysterious disappearance. The search was grueling. The weather didn't help. Rain and sweltering heat turned an already difficult task into a true test of endurance. But the investigators didn't back down. They meticulously sifted through every corner of the farm, from the open fields to the barns, and even the wooded areas surrounding the property. Then, in a pile of fire ash, they made a discovery that would send a shock wave through the entire investigation. Among the charred remnants, they found pieces of clothing that appeared to have been recently burned. This discovery was a crucial turning point. The fact that someone had gone to such lengths to destroy evidence hinted at something far darker. Could this be linked to Crystal? Had she been harmed? And was her body disposed of here in an effort to cover up the crime? The questions lingered, and the pressure mounted as investigators sought a solid lead that could definitively tie the Houck family to Crystal's disappearance. But as investigators continued to dig, the complexity of the situation only grew. New revelations suggested a web of lies, corruption, and a disturbing willingness to hide the truth. The community, reeling from the fear that one of their own could be involved in something so horrific, rallied behind Crystal's family. They held vigils, spread awareness, and hoped for a break in the case. The FBI, working hand in hand with local authorities, even offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help locate Crystal. Despite the intense investigation, the truth remained elusive. Every clue seemed to lead to more questions, but no concrete answers. The only certainty was that the Houck family was hiding something. And with every passing day, it seemed like only a matter of time before those secrets were forced into the light. The search for Crystal Rogers had become a relentless, all-consuming battle for her family. Tommy Ballard, her father, was at the forefront of this fight, dedicating himself fully to uncovering the truth behind his daughter's disappearance. His tireless efforts to find Crystal and seek justice for her became the backbone of the family's hope. But just as they began to feel like they were inching closer to answers, another tragedy struck. In November 2016, a little over a year after Crystal vanished, Tommy was killed. Tommy had been out hunting with his grandson, enjoying a quiet afternoon in the woods. What should have been a peaceful day quickly turned into a nightmare for the Ballard family. He was shot once in the chest, a blow that came without warning and left his loved ones in utter disbelief. At first, authorities labeled Tommy's death as a tragic hunting accident, but the Ballard family knew better. Something felt off, and it wasn't just the nature of the accident. It was the timing. Tommy had been deeply involved in investigating Crystal's disappearance. He had spent countless hours tracking down leads and funding the search out of his own pocket. His pursuit of the truth had led him to uncover disturbing connections, and it seemed that someone was desperately trying to cover their tracks. Was Tommy's murder a deliberate act to silence him? Was he killed because of the truths he was getting too close to? As investigators began to dig deeper into the circumstances of his death, a chilling pattern emerged. The shot that killed Tommy was fired from someone positioned outside, someone who had been lying in wait. The location of the shooting also raised questions. It occurred on the same family property that Tommy had been tirelessly scouring in search of his daughter. The parallels between Crystal's case and Tommy's murder were hard to ignore, and it quickly became clear that the two were linked in a much darker way. For the Ballard family, Tommy's death was a devastating blow. They had already been living with the anguish of Crystal's disappearance, and now they were faced with the unbearable pain of losing Tommy in such a senseless, violent way. But his murder also opened up even more unsettling questions. Who wanted to silence him? Who would go to such lengths to stop the investigation? Was Crystal's disappearance The work of someone close to her? A person willing to kill to keep the truth buried? Tommy's death had turned the case into something far more complex, something deeper than a missing person's mystery. It had become a web of violence, lies, and hidden motives, an investigation fraught with betrayal and treachery. And for the Ballard family, it raised a haunting question. Would they ever get the answers they so desperately sought? As the years passed, Crystal Rogers' case continued to weigh heavily on the small town of Bardstown. Despite the mounting evidence pointing toward the Houck family, justice seemed to remain just out of reach. Then, in 2022, a flicker of hope appeared when the FBI returned to the Houck family farm. With fresh eyes and renewed resolve, investigators spent 5 painstaking days combing through the property, collecting crucial pieces of evidence that had been overlooked in the past. The search at the Houck farm proved to be a turning point. New forensic evidence was gathered and sent for analysis at the FBI's lab in Quantico. With this breakthrough, combined with years of dogged work, the case finally gained momentum. It wasn't long before the Kentucky Attorney General's office appointed a special prosecutor to oversee the investigation. For the Ballard family, this was the first real sign of progress in years, an indication that their fight for justice was not in vain. The appointment of the special prosecutor marked the beginning of a series of shocking developments. In July 2023, Joseph Lawson, a man connected to the Houck family, was indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. While his involvement was a surprise, it was only the beginning of the case's unraveling. 2 months later, in September 2023, the most anticipated arrest was made. Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend, was taken into custody. Charged with murder and evidence tampering, Brooks was accused of playing a direct role in Crystal's disappearance. His bond was set at an extraordinary $10 million, a reflection of the severity of the charges against him. For the Ballard family, this was the moment they had waited for, but it was bittersweet. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, had not lived to see this day. His tragic death, like Crystal's disappearance, still haunted the investigation. As the case against Brooks Houck began to take shape, the links between Tommy's murder and Crystal's abduction grew more apparent. Could Tommy's death have been an attempt to silence him? An effort to protect the Houck family's secrets? The arrest of Brooks Houck was a pivotal moment in the case, but the journey was far from over. As new evidence continued to surface and more individuals came forward, the investigation into both Crystal's disappearance and Tommy's murder began to unravel further. And as the trial drew nearer, the Ballard family was left with the painful reality of confronting the truth, no matter how difficult it might be, and finding the closure they had been searching for all these years. As the legal proceedings moved forward, the trial of Brooks Houck became the epicenter of the investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Crystal Rogers and the heartbreaking murder of Tommy Ballard. The arrest of Brooks, along with mounting evidence against him, brought a sense of anxious anticipation to the Ballard family. After years of enduring pain and confusion, they were finally nearing the possibility of justice. The early hearings were nothing short of dramatic. With virtual court appearances, intense media coverage, and the prosecution's revealing of new evidence, the trial became a spectacle that captured the public's attention. It soon became evident that the prosecution was ready to connect the dots between the two tragic deaths. Brooks was not only accused of Crystal's brutal murder, but also of tampering with evidence in an attempt to cover his tracks. The Ballard family, forever haunted by the loss of Crystal and Tommy, watched anxiously, hoping this would be the moment they would finally get the closure that had been cruelly denied to them for so long. However, the road to justice was far from smooth. Brooks's defense team fought fiercely, challenging the judge's impartiality and trying to lower his bond. Their efforts to dismantle the case were met with strong resistance from the prosecution, which had built a solid case with compelling evidence. The trial had reached a critical point, but as each new piece of information emerged, it became painfully clear that the web of lies and deceit surrounding the Houck family ran much deeper than anyone had initially suspected. One of the most chilling revelations came when investigators traced the weapon used to kill Tommy. The gun had been purchased from none other than Nick Houck, Brooks's brother. Ballistics testing confirmed that the bullet used in Tommy's murder matched the firearm, raising the horrifying possibility that Tommy's death had been a calculated effort to silence him, someone who was getting dangerously close to uncovering the truth about his daughter's disappearance. But the disturbing discoveries didn't stop there. The investigation into the Houck family uncovered a string of criminal activity that painted a grim picture. Allegations of further evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and even a secret grand jury recording surfaced, making the case even more complicated. It was as if every layer peeled back, revealed something darker, more sinister than anyone had imagined. As the trial continued, the Ballard family clung to their hope for justice, refusing to let the darkness of the past overshadow their determination to see the truth come to light. The small town of Bardstown, too, was shaken to its core. The once peaceful community now found itself gripped by whispers and distrust, as long-held illusions about those they once trusted crumbled away. The shocking truths about the Houck family were now out in the open, and no one could ignore the profound implications. For the Ballard family, every passing day in the courtroom deepened their emotional wounds. While they could see the wheels of justice slowly turning, the years of uncertainty and grief had left scars that would never fully heal. But through it all, they remained resolute. They knew Crystal's story, Tommy's relentless fight for the truth, deserved to be told, no matter the cost. As the trial of Brooks Houck neared its conclusion, the weight of the Ballard family's journey grew unbearably heavy. They had fought tirelessly for so long, enduring one heartbreak after another. Crystal Rogers' disappearance and Tommy Ballard's murder had cast a dark shadow over their lives, but now, in the courtroom, they had the opportunity to finally confront the truth. Yet, with every passing day, the emotional toll seemed impossible to bear. The legal battles drained them, each courtroom revelation stirring the raw pain of their grief anew. But despite it all, there was a palpable sense that justice, though delayed, was now within reach. The Ballard family's unyielding persistence, their refusal to let go of the truth, had become the driving force behind the investigation. Each piece of evidence that connected the Houck family to Crystal's disappearance and Tommy's murder felt like a small victory, but it was still bittersweet. Tommy, their beloved father and grandfather, was no longer there to witness it. His death had loomed over the entire case, casting a long, heavy shadow. Now, with Brooks Houck's trial nearing its end, the family was left wondering, would they ever find peace. The quest for justice was not only for the Ballard family, it was for the entire community of Bardstown. The townspeople, who had once trusted the Houcks and been familiar with their reputation, now found themselves confronted with the reality of the crimes that had unfolded behind closed doors. The very foundation of trust had been shattered, and Bardstown, once a quiet town, was forever changed. This case had exposed a chilling truth, that those closest to the victims could be capable of the most horrific betrayal. For the people of Bardstown, the trial became a reckoning, a difficult, painful moment to come to terms with the dark secrets hiding in their midst. As the trial drew to a close, one question loomed over everyone. Would the Houck family finally be held accountable for their actions? The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The weight of years of pain, uncertainty, and frustration hanging heavily in the air. For the Ballard family, this trial had become more than just a fight for justice. It was a battle for the memory of their loved ones and for the hope that, after all their suffering, they might find some form of closure. The legacies of Crystal Rogers and Tommy Ballard would forever be intertwined with the pursuit of justice. The battle they fought, the love they shared, and the family they left behind had endured unimaginable loss. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming grief, the Ballards refused to give up. Their resilience throughout this long journey was remarkable, and as the case neared its final stages, their strength and unwavering determination left an indelible mark on everyone who followed their story. No matter the outcome of the trial, the Ballards knew one thing for certain: their fight for truth had changed them forever. Their legacy would be one of relentless pursuit of justice, no matter the cost. As the final verdicts were handed down, the town of Bardstown seemed to hold its breath. Years of unanswered questions, false leads, and endless dead ends had led the Ballard family to this crucial moment. It was the culmination of pain, uncertainty, and an unrelenting grief that had tormented them for far too long. This was the day when justice would either be served or the nightmare would continue. The trial of Brooks Houck represented the culmination of everything the Ballards had endured. It wasn't just a legal battle, it was an emotional war fought in their hearts. Memories of Crystal and Tommy had never stopped haunting them. When the final day arrived, the judge declared a verdict, and the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. The weight of the moment pressed heavily in the air. Brooks Houck was found guilty of Crystal Rogers' murder, the woman he had once claimed to love. His betrayal, his cruelty, had finally been exposed. It was the day the town, the family, and the victims had all been waiting for. But even with the conviction, there was no sense of relief for the Ballard family. They had won a battle, but the war, filled with grief, loss, and heartache, was far from over. Crystal's memory had been sealed with her justice, but Tommy's death still haunted them. The chilling connection between the two cases, the realization that Tommy had likely been killed to silence the truth, left a feeling of unresolved closure. The conviction of Brooks Houck was small solace, but it did little to bring Tommy back or ease the years of suffering the family had endured. For the people of Bardstown, the case had shattered their image of their own community. Neighbors who once seemed trustworthy were now revealed to have been involved in something far darker. But even in the face of such darkness, there was a faint glimmer of light. The Ballard family had shown extraordinary resilience. Despite everything, they had kept fighting, not only for their loved ones, but for the truth. They refused to let fear, manipulation, and lies keep them silent. The town, too, had been forced to face the uncomfortable truth, no longer able to ignore the horrors that had unfolded in their midst. As the case came to its legal conclusion, with Brooks Houck convicted and Tommy's murder still under investigation, the Ballard family's fight didn't end. They had lost so much, Crystal, Tommy, and the years of pain they had lived through, but they had gained something too. They had become symbols of perseverance, a testament to the power of love, family, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Their story, though steeped in tragedy, would forever serve as an inspiration for others to stand firm in the face of injustice. Though the legal proceedings had ended, the emotional scars remained. For the Ballard family, they knew this. Their fight wasn't just for Crystal or Tommy. It was for all those whose voices had been silenced. It was for anyone who had ever felt forgotten, ignored, or dismissed. Their legacy would not be one of despair, but of unyielding strength in the face of unspeakable pain. As the years passed, the story of Crystal Rogers and Tommy Ballard would not fade into memory. It would endure, not just as a reminder of a tragic loss, but as a symbol of the price of truth, the cost of justice. The Ballard family's relentless pursuit of answers ensured that the world would never forget. If you were moved by the Ballard family's fight for justice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep their story and the pursuit of truth alive.